Welcome back. There are a lot of role play games out there. Terrors and Tactics is one role play game, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, Chris Johnson, the creator of Terrors and Tactics.
Howdy.
Thank you for coming on our program today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Pleasure having you here, as always. And you and I have been playing Dungeons and Dragons for a long time. You've been playing a lot of other role play games too, but
Yeah,
it's just,
it engages my inner frustrated novelist, you might say.
yeah.
So, yeah, I do all sorts of things with that. I'm also just artist in general. So,
Yeah, I was seeing a lot of your artwork, and you use a lot of it in your Terrors and Tactics game as well.
that's the plan.
That's the plan. And like I've said, we've been playing role play games for a long time now. But what made you decide to make your own game?
Well, I'd always been big on house ruling on stuff, coming up with things that I thought better fit particular games, things like that. The main thing that started out though was the transition from fourth edition D&D to fifth edition. I should start with the fact that fourth edition is by far my favorite edition of D&D because it's the first time without house ruling I was ever able to explore some concepts that I always thought were just kind of basic fantasy tropes, but you were never able to do them in D&D. Like your lightly armored hero who just has his sword and his skill that before D&D always had to bulk up on heavy armor or anything like that if you were ever going to be able to survive in a fight. Fourth edition was the first time with their scaling defenses that you could have a guy just in armor with a sword who's being a hero just like what you'd see on TV or in a movie or something like that, real easy. Second element of that was that you could go with the spellcaster, who is able to cast their spells all day long. Third edition got into it a little bit with the warlock, but it had very specific character to it.
Otherwise, you were limited.
Yeah, whereas with fourth edition, you were able to be a wizard, or you could be a cleric, or you could be what have you, and you could do magical things all the time, which is just like what you see in stories. It's not just, oh, I only cast this one thing and then I'm done with it for the day, what have you. Third one is I'm very Christian. I'm very Catholic, actually. Some of my friends call me Captain Catholic. But the whole pantheistic element of a lot of the stuff with the gods and the things like that, I've never been 100% comfortable with it, but then they've always gated the healing and the stuff you need to really support a party behind that, and that was always a thing. Whereas in fourth edition you had the warlord and you had the bard and the artificer and these people who had nothing to do with the religious aspect who could fill that role in the party, and that just really spoke to me as far as, because you don't often see, especially, and this goes back to stories again, you don't generally see some priest in full plate armor with a mace mending bones and things like that in the middle of a battlefield. It's not a big part
Yeah.
of fiction outside of D&D. Whereas the notion of the charismatic war leader who says, get up off the ground and keep fighting, you see that all the time in fiction. That's
In
something that you
movies and books. And
exactly. It's something that is worth emulating. So, in other words, fourth edition was the first edition where I really felt I could play what I wanted to play. And then fifth edition came along and it did a whole big thing with nostalgia. They started going backwards on a number of things that I thought were really innovative. So, initially, I was just going to make something that was going to be fourth edition, Pathfinder style, if you will. But One of the big things that struck me when I was reading about how fourth edition developed was questioning everything. That when they were developing it, they said, is this the best way to solve a problem in role playing? And so I decided, let's go take a look at fourth edition. Let's not just copy it. Let's say, why did they make the decisions they did? Was this the best decision to make? And is there a better way to do it? And if so, let's go with that. So that's kind of where it started. And that's why instead of being out in a couple of months, because I'm basically just taking the thing with a file and filing the numbers off, so to speak, I started actually looking at this, working on the mechanical balance and things like that. And I guess that's the other big thing that with Terrors and Tactics that came out of this was not only was I trying to bring in those elements that I felt were kind of cast aside with D&D, another part of it was the interesting tactical combats. I think that there's something to be said for being able to have a fun get together where, yeah, it's the battle might take 45 minutes, but everybody's having fun during it because they're getting to do interesting things. So
Yeah.
that's another aspect of it. It's why it ended up being called Terrors and Tactics.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll go over character creation in another segment. You'll come back on for that. And I
Sounds good.
appreciate you joining us today. And Terrors and Tactics, it's coming soon. It's in play testing stage. We'll be right back after this.
Hold on. Go down in there and show me. You've got creepers in a TNT house. Hold still. Alright, go fly back up. Evan, fly back out. Look, go off to the side and look at it from afar. Go down a little. That's cool.